You are listening to Blackout Radio. I am Daniel Voss. It is 11 minutes past 9 in the evening, and we are breaking into our regularly scheduled programming to bring you a developing emergency situation of what our editors are now describing as unprecedented national and potentially international scope. To be precise about what we know at this moment, at approximately 8:47 p.m. local time, a joint declaration was issued simultaneously by the heads of government of 4 sovereign nations: the Republic of Valdoria, the Federal States of Norheim, the Grand Union of Calthera, and the coastal territory of Serath, declaring full martial law across their combined territories, effective immediately. That is 4 countries. That is a combined population, according to our most recent census data on file, of approximately 219 million people who are, as of this moment, living under military governance. We do not yet have a confirmed singular cause. What we have confirmed is that the declarations are real, they are active, and they are being enforced on the ground right now.
Good evening, I'm Maya Ross, and I want to start by just taking a breath with you for a moment, because I think a lot of people listening right now are scared. Maybe you heard something outside, maybe your phone buzzed with an alert you didn't fully understand, maybe someone you love called you and you couldn't reach them back. I want you to know that we are here, we are not going anywhere, and for as long as this station has power and signal, Daniel and I will be your voice through this night. We've been receiving messages from listeners in all 4 of the affected territories since this broke, and I want to read you one that just came in. This is from a woman identifying herself only as Nara, writing from the city of Olvenhaun in Norheim. And she says, and I'm quoting directly, "I can hear helicopters, my children are asking me what's happening, and I don't know what to tell them. Please just keep talking. Nara, we hear you. We are talking. We are not stopping."
Let me give you the geographic picture, because it matters enormously to understanding the logistics of what is unfolding. Valdoria occupies the central landmass of the region. Capital city Valdris, population 4.1 million, situated on the Veln River Delta. Norheim is to the north, bordered by the Greyvast mountain range along its eastern edge. Its largest city, Olvenhaven, has a population of approximately 2.3 million and is an industrial and shipping hub. Calthera spans the southern corridor, a heavily agricultural nation whose capital, Myrene, sits at a critical rail junction connecting the southern ports to the interior. And Serath. Serath is the most geographically vulnerable of the 4. It is a narrow coastal territory, roughly 340 kilometers in length, with no natural elevation barrier to the sea. Combined, these 4 nations form what geopolitical analysts have long called the Central Corridor, a strategic artery for trade, energy transit, and communications infrastructure that feeds not just this region, but has downstream effects on at least 11 neighboring countries.
We're now getting fragments. I want to be honest that these are fragments, not confirmed full reports, from people on the ground in Valdris, the capital of Valdoria. A listener named Iman wrote in about 10 minutes ago and said he was driving home from a late shift at a hospital when military vehicles blocked the main arterial road into the Fenwick district. He says, and I'm reading this carefully, there were maybe 30 soldiers at the checkpoint. They were calm, not aggressive, but they had their weapons. They told us to return home and stay indoors. A woman in the car next to me started crying. I didn't know what to say to her. That image, 30 soldiers at a checkpoint, a crying woman, a man who didn't know what to say. That is what martial law feels like from the inside in the first hour. Not abstract, not political, just a road blocked and a woman crying and no answers yet.
We're now approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes into the declared state of martial law, and I want to walk you through the infrastructure picture as best we can assess it. At 9:03 p.m., Olvenhout International Airport in Norheim issued a ground stop. All inbound and outbound flights suspended indefinitely. 16 minutes later, Valdres Central Airport followed. Mirena Regional in Calthera had already suspended operations by 9:22 p.m. Sarath has no commercial airport of significant size, but its 2 military airstrips in the north are reportedly active, with air traffic that our monitoring sources describe as unusually high. Port closures followed the airport suspensions almost exactly. Port Valdres, which handles roughly 12% of the region's maritime freight, has been sealed. Port Olvenhaven, a critical fuel import terminal, was closed by military order at 9:34 p.m. What this means, practically, is that as of now, no commercial goods, no fuel shipments, no civilian aircraft are moving in or out of a combined territory of 219 million people.
I'm holding a message that I think captures something important, something about what people reach for in moments like this. This one comes from a man named Thomas, writing from a small farming town called Breck, just outside Moreni in Calthera. He says, "We don't have much news down here. The TV went to a static government announcement about an hour ago. I went outside and my neighbors were all standing in their yards, just looking at each other. Nobody went inside. We've been standing here for 40 minutes. Mrs. Phelan from next door brought out a pot of tea and we're all just standing here drinking tea, not knowing what's happening." I love that image, Thomas. I love that Mrs. Phelan made tea. There's something very human about that, something that no amount of military machinery can take away. The instinct to gather, to share something warm, to not be alone.
We are getting our first casualty figures, and I want to report these carefully, because early numbers in a crisis are almost always incomplete and frequently revised upward. As of 10:15 p.m., the Valdorian Emergency Services Coordination Network, which is still partially operational, has reported 14 confirmed fatalities in the Valdres metro area. The causes are mixed. 3 are confirmed traffic fatalities related to the chaotic road conditions following the declaration. 2 are reported as confrontations at checkpoints, the circumstances of which we do not yet have detail on. And 9 are classified as what emergency services are calling civil disturbance related, which is a broad category we will need more information on. In Olvenhauen, Norheim, official figures are not yet available, but our correspondent monitoring local emergency frequencies is hearing references to injuries at the central rail station, where a crowd was apparently attempting to board trains out of the city when military personnel closed the station at 9:47 p.m. We do not have a confirmed injury count from that incident.
The rail station in Olvenhaven, I want to stay with that for a moment because I've been to Olvenhaven. I reported from there 3 years ago during the flooding crisis. And I know that station, it's the heart of the city. At any given evening rush hour, there are 15,000 people moving through it. And if you are one of those people, if you are standing on a platform holding your bag, having heard that martial law has been declared and the doors close and the soldiers come in and tell you the trains are not running, the fear that comes from that moment isn't just fear of soldiers, it's the fear of being trapped, of not being able to get home or get to your family or get out. That is a specific kind of fear, and it is what hundreds of thousands of people across these 4 nations are feeling right now.
It is now 10:52 in the evening. We are 2 hours and 5 minutes into this declared state of martial law, and the official government statements have begun to arrive, slowly, and with a notable lack of specific explanation. The joint statement issued by the 4 governments reads, in its official English translation, as follows. In recognition of an existential threat to the territorial integrity, civilian safety, and sovereign continuity of our nations, the governments of Valdoria, Norheim, Calthera, and Sarath have, with unified resolve, enacted emergency military governance effective immediately. Citizens are directed to remain in their residences between the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. Essential services will be maintained under military supervision. Further guidance will be issued at 6-hour intervals. That is the complete statement. There is no specification of the threat. There is no naming of an enemy, internal or external. There is no timeline for resolution. There is, in the language of emergency governance, what analysts call a blank declaration, maximum authority, minimum disclosure.
Minimum disclosure. I want to talk about what that does to people because I think it's one of the most underreported aspects of crises like this. When you know what you're facing, even if it's terrible, like you can begin to make a plan. You can think, I need to move, or I need to shelter, or I need to find water. But when the threat is unnamed, when the government says only existential threat and nothing more, the mind fills in the blanks. And what the mind fills in is almost always worse than the truth. We're seeing that in the messages pouring in right now. A listener from Marin says she's convinced it's a foreign invasion. Someone from coastal Sarath, a fisherman, he says, writing from his boat in the harbor, says he's heard it's a chemical attack. A young man from Valdres says his uncle, who works in government, told him it was an internal coup. 3 people, 3 different cities, 3 completely different understandings of the same 2 words, existential threat. This is what happens when information is withheld. Fear becomes a rumor machine.
At 11:08 p.m., we received our first partial confirmation of a possible triggering event, though we are treating this with significant caution because the source has not been independently verified. A communications intercept shared by the Blackout Radio security desk, which I want to emphasize is unverified at this stage, suggests that a coordinated cyber attack of significant scale began targeting the Central Corridor's critical infrastructure at approximately 6:30 p.m. roughly 2.5 hours before the martial law declaration. The attack reportedly targeted 3 categories simultaneously: the power grid control systems in Valdoria and Norheim, the financial transaction networks that service all 4 nations, and, most critically, the military command authentication systems that the 4 governments share as part of a 2019 mutual defense treaty. If that last element is accurate, it would explain the simultaneity of the declaration. If military authentication systems are compromised, a coordinated military declaration may itself serve as a reset or lockdown protocol. I want to be clear. This is one possible explanation, and it remains unverified.
While Daniel works through that, I want to update you on what we're hearing from hospitals across the region, because healthcare is always where a crisis shows its human cost most plainly. We have reports now from 3 hospitals in the Valdres metropolitan area, Veln General, Crossgate Medical Center, and the Children's Hospital at St. Marin's, that all 3 are operating under surge protocols. Veln General has activated its emergency overflow wing. The specific report we have comes from a nurse who asked to remain anonymous and reached us through our secure message line. She says, and I'm quoting, "We have patients coming in who were injured in the crowd panics, fractures, lacerations, one cardiac event in a man in his 60s who collapsed at a checkpoint. We also have people who are just terrified. They came to the hospital because they didn't know where else to go. Some of them have nowhere to go. That last line, some of them have nowhere to go. Remember that tonight."
It is now 11:41 p.m. We are 2 hours and 54 minutes into the declaration. The power situation has deteriorated, and I want to give you the clearest picture we have. As of approximately 11:15 p.m., the northern grid servicing Olvenhaven and the surrounding Norheim industrial belt has experienced what our contacts at the Norheim National Power Authority are describing as a cascading partial failure. That means approximately 340,000 households in the Olvenhaven metro area are currently without power. The grid failure appears to be originating from the Kessler substation, which is the primary routing node for that entire northern network. Whether this failure is a consequence of the cyber attack hypothesis we mentioned earlier, physical sabotage, or an overload caused by the chaos of the last 3 hours, we do not know. What we know is that it is dark in a city of 2 million people on the first night of martial law, and backup generators are running at hospitals, military installations, and emergency services, but not at homes.
Dark in a city of 2 million people. I keep coming back to that. It's nearly midnight, and across Olvenhavn right now, people are sitting in their apartments in the dark, listening, and some of them are listening to us. We know that because the messages from Olvenhavn listeners are still coming in, many of them written from phones on battery power. One of them, a woman named Dasha, wrote, "I found a candle. My daughter's asleep. I don't want to wake her because I don't have answers. I'm just going to keep the candle burning and listen to your voices until morning." Dasha, we're here. Daniel and I are not going anywhere. Keep that candle lit.
Crossing into the midnight hour now, and I have updated casualty figures. These have been compiled by Blackout Radio's data team from emergency frequency monitoring, hospital communications we've been able to access, and direct listener reports that we have triangulated for credibility. The current figure we are working with is 47 confirmed fatalities across the 4 nations combined. Broken down by territory, 19 in Valdoria, 16 in Norheim, a number that may rise as we get clearer information from Olvenhavn's darkened districts, 8 in Kalthera and 4 in Sarath. These deaths, as best we can determine, break into 3 categories: crowd crush and panic injuries, a smaller number of confrontational incidents at military checkpoints, and medical emergencies that could not be adequately responded to due to the logistical chaos. I will tell you plainly that in any comparable historical precedent, the Herath incident of 1987, the Sova city lockdown in 2003, the casualty figures at the 3-hour mark have typically represented no more than 10 to 15% of the ultimate toll. This night is not over.
It's 3 minutes past midnight. We are 3 hours into this. I want to take a moment to acknowledge what that means for the people who have been awake since this started. The parents who have been on the phone trying to reach children at university in Valdres, the elderly people in Norheim who are sitting in the dark without heat because it is October in the north and the nights are cold. We got a message from a man named Grell, 67 years old, living alone in a district of Olvenhavn called Hartskwy. He says the power has been out for 40 minutes in his building. He has 2 blankets and a portable radio, and he wanted us to know that he remembers a blackout in 1978 when he was a young man, and that his mother told him the trick was to keep moving. "Don't sit still," she told him. "Keep moving and you'll stay warm." He says he's been walking slow circles around his kitchen table for the last half hour. "Grell, your mother was a wise woman. Keep walking."
New information at 12:17 a.m., and this is significant. The government of Valdoria, acting apparently in advance of the joint communiqué promised at 6-hour intervals, has issued a partial clarification of the martial law trigger. And this is the first time we have official confirmation of any kind of specific cause. The Valdorian Ministry of Defense has released a statement saying, and I am reading the official translation, "The governments of the Central Corridor nations have identified and confirmed the presence of a coordinated hostile network, designation Ironfall, which has, over a period of no less than 8 months, systematically infiltrated the command and communications infrastructure of all 4 Central Corridor militaries, the financial clearing networks of the region, and critical civilian utilities in multiple urban centers. The declaration of martial law represents a controlled security lockdown designed to prevent Ironfall operatives from exploiting a window of military vulnerability. The lockdown is expected to last between 72 and 96 hours. Ironfall. That is the name we have. A coordinated hostile network, 8 months of infiltration, and a 72 to 96 hour lockdown. That is the first concrete information we have received.
Ironfall, 72 to 96 hours. I want to think about what that means in human terms for a moment, because for Dasha in Olvenhavn with her candle, 72 hours means 3 more nights like this one. For the nurse at Veln General running on an emergency surge protocol, 72 hours means 3 days of this pace. For the families who got separated tonight, who couldn't reach each other because of road closures and checkpoint systems, 72 hours means 3 days of not knowing. And for Mrs. Phelan in Breck, it means a lot more tea. I say that partly in tenderness, because I mean it. There is something in that small act of communal care that I believe will carry people through, but let's not minimize what 72 hours of martial law means in practical terms. It means food supply chains that are already disrupted continue to be disrupted. It means medicines that need refrigeration in a city with no power are already beginning to be at risk.
On the question of supplies, our data team has been modeling the impact of the port and airport closures against regional inventory data, and the results are concerning, particularly for 2 categories. First, fuel. Norheim imports approximately 68% of its petroleum products through Port Olvenhavn. With that port sealed, current fuel reserves, accounting for military priority use, are estimated at roughly 5 to 7 days for the civilian population. Second, pharmaceuticals. The Central Corridor region, specifically Valdoria and Calthera, relies heavily on imported medication for insulin, dialysis supplies, and oncology treatments. The Valdorian Pharmacists Association had been, prior to this crisis, warning of a 12-day supply buffer. With the declaration in effect, that buffer may be insufficient if the 72 to 96 hour window is not adhered to. These are not immediate crises. They are crises on a timer, and the clock is running.
It is now 1:09 in the morning. We are 4 hours in, and I want to tell you about an act of courage that we've confirmed through 2 independent listener reports. In the city of Moreni, Calthera, where, remember, many residents had no information beyond the government's static announcement on television, a woman named Bree Aldana, who works as a community paramedic, spent the first 4 hours of the lockdown going door to door in her district on foot because the roads are closed, knocking on doors, checking on elderly residents, bringing glucose tablets and blood pressure medication from her paramedic bag to people who needed it. 2 listeners independently confirmed seeing her doing this, and one of them wrote to us, "She had a lantern, she was calm, she told everyone she spoke to what we know and what we don't know, and somehow that was enough to make people feel less afraid." Bree Aldana of Mirene. We don't know if she's listening, but we want her to know that we know what she did tonight.
It is 1:47 a.m. The Norheim power outage has expanded. The initial cascade from the Kessler substation has now propagated to 2 additional routing nodes, and our monitoring of Norheim emergency frequencies indicates that approximately 890,000 households, up from the 340,000 we reported earlier, are now without power across Olvenhavn and 4 surrounding municipalities. The temperature in the Olvenhavn region at this hour is 4 degrees Celsius, approximately 39 degrees Fahrenheit. For context, building heating systems in the Norheim industrial north are predominantly grid-dependent. Emergency services are reporting their first hypothermia-related calls, predominantly among the elderly and among infants. At least 1 shelter has been opened by military order at Olvenhavn's Grenthal Arena, a large indoor venue that has emergency generator power. Military loudspeaker trucks are reportedly moving through the darkened districts, directing residents to the shelter. Current confirmed count at Grenthal, approximately 4,200 people.
4 degrees Celsius. And I'm thinking about Grell, still walking circles around his kitchen table in Hearts Quay. Grell, if you can hear us, the shelter at Grenfell Arena is open. You can go there. I know it feels wrong to leave your home on a night like this, but please, if you are cold, please go. And for anyone listening who has a neighbor who might be elderly, who lives alone, who you haven't heard from tonight, please knock on their door. That one act might save a life tonight. Don't wait for an announcement. Don't wait for a directive. Just knock on the door.
At 2:31 a.m., we are marking 5 hours into the declaration. I want to give you a cumulative timeline, because at this pace, events are moving fast, and it helps to hold the shape of what has happened. 8:47 p.m. Joint Martial Law Declaration issued. 9:03 to 9:34 p.m. Airports and ports sealed across all 4 nations. 9:47 p.m. Olvenhaven rail station closed. 10:52 p.m. First official joint statement. Existential threat named, no details given. 11:15 p.m. Norheim Northern Grid begins cascade failure. 12:17. Valdorian Ministry of Defense names Ironfall and confirms 72 to 96 hour lockdown window. 1:47 a.m. Power outage expands to 890,000 Norheim households. Casualty figures now sit at, and these are our updated numbers from the past 30 minutes, 89 confirmed fatalities across the 4 nations. The jump from 47 to 89 in roughly 2 hours reflects not necessarily an acceleration of violence, but the arrival of information from districts that were previously unreachable due to communication disruptions. We expect the number to continue rising as the dark portions of Olvenhaven become accessible.
89 people. I'm going to say that again because I think in a crisis, numbers can become abstract very quickly. 89 people who were alive at 8:47 p.m. are not alive now. They are sons and daughters and parents and neighbors, and the man who ran the corner bakery and the retired school teacher who walks her dog every evening at 9 p.m. on a route she's been walking for 20 years. Some of them died in a crowd on a train platform. Some died in their cars on a chaotic road. Some died because an ambulance couldn't reach them in time. I don't want us to lose them to the momentum of this broadcast. We owe it to them to say their number plainly and to feel the weight of it.
It is 3:15 a.m. We are now 6 hours in. The second government communique, promised at 6-hour intervals, has been released, and I want to read the relevant sections. Quote, Operation Ironfall. Containment is proceeding according to military protocol. As of 3 a.m., 214 individuals with confirmed operational ties to the Ironfall network have been detained across the 4 nations. Military infrastructure has been secured at all primary nodes. Civilian disruption is acknowledged and is being addressed through emergency relief operations. The curfew remains in effect. Power restoration in Norheim is expected to begin in 6 to 8 hours. The Central Corridor Unified Command extends its assurance that the 72 to 96-hour window remains the operative timeline. End quote. 214 detentions. That is a significant operation. Whatever Ironfall is, and we still don't have a full picture, the scale of the human network they've rolled up in 6 hours tells us this has been planned for a very long time. You do not detain 214 people from 4 nations in 6 hours without preparation that spans months.
6 to 8 hours for power restoration in Norheim. For the people in the dark right now, that means at the earliest, 9 or 10 a.m. An entire night in the dark and the cold. I want to update you on the Grenfell Arena shelter because we've been getting messages from people who are there or who got there safely. Current population at the shelter is now over 11,000 people. A listener named Petra, who arrived there about an hour ago with her 3 children, wrote, It's crowded, it smells like a sports arena, and the children's section is running low on juice and crackers. But there are volunteers. Ordinary people who live nearby just showed up with food from their own kitchens. A retired teacher is reading stories to a circle of small children in a corner. I didn't expect kindness tonight, but it's here. Petra, that is the story. Amongst everything else that is happening tonight, that is the story I want you to hold on to.
As we move toward 4 a.m., I want to turn attention to the fourth nation in this declaration, Sarath, which has received the least coverage in our broadcast so far, and which may, in fact, be the most critically situated. Sarath's geographic vulnerability bears repeating. It is a narrow coastal territory, approximately 340 kilometers long, and in many places no more than 60 kilometers wide, bounded on its western edge entirely by open sea. Its northern point is a shipping strait through which, in normal times, approximately 8% of the region's daily maritime traffic passes. We have received fragmentary information, and I stress fragmentary, suggesting that the Ironfall operation may have had specific targeting in Sarath related to the coastal defense monitoring systems. If those systems have been compromised or taken offline, the seaward approaches to Sarath, and by extension the southern coast of Calthera, would be effectively unmonitored. We are attempting to verify this, but have not yet been able to do so. The military airstrip activity we noted earlier in northern Sarath may be directly related.
It is 4:22 a.m., 7.5 hours in, and I want to acknowledge something that I think is happening right now for a lot of people listening, the specific exhaustion of fear. It is a particular thing. It's not like physical tiredness, which comes from doing. It comes from holding tension in your body for hours, from listening for sounds outside, from checking your phone and getting no signal and checking it again anyway, from the mental effort of trying to remain calm for the children or the elderly person in your home, while inside you are anything but calm. We got a message just now from a father in Valdres who says his 9-year-old son has been awake all night and keeps asking him the same question. Is this the worst thing that's ever happened? And he told his son, not the worst, but one of the hard ones. If that is where you are right now, holding one of the hard ones, I want you to know that what you're feeling is not weakness. It is the cost of living through something real.
At 4:58 a.m., we're 8 hours in, and we have a significant development in Sarath. This has been confirmed through 2 independent military frequency monitoring sources, as well as a listener report from someone claiming to be a Sarathian Coast Guard officer. We are treating his report as credible based on specificity of detail. At approximately 4:30 a.m., a fleet of unidentified naval vessels, our source estimates between 8 and 12 ships, entered the Sarathian maritime exclusion zone from the Western Sea approach. The vessels are not responding to Coast Guard hails. Sarathian military forces have been scrambled to coastal positions. We do not know the origin or intent of these vessels. We do not know if this is connected to Ironfall. What we know is that a fleet of unidentified ships is approaching the coast of Sarath in the dark, and the Sarathian military, which is already under extreme strain from the martial law operation, is now simultaneously trying to manage an internal lockdown and a potential external threat from the sea.
I need a moment, because the ships off the coast of Sarath, that is the thing that changes this broadcast. Up until now, for all the fear and the darkness and the 89 people we've lost, this was a crisis that felt in some way contained, internal, a government action, however extreme, against a named threat. But ships in the water in the dark, that is something different. That is an external dimension. And if Daniel's sources are right about the coastal defense systems being compromised as part of Ironfall, then those ships, whoever they are, may know exactly how undefended that coastline is right now. I am not going to speculate about who sent them. I'm going to keep breathing and I'm going to keep talking to you, but I want to be honest about what that development means for the shape of this night.
It is 5:30 a.m., 9 hours in. Sunrise in Valdoria is at 6:47 a.m. In Norheim, it comes a little later, just past 7 a.m. We are counting down to light. I want to give you updated casualty figures before we enter the next phase of this broadcast, because the numbers have moved. At this hour, we are working with a confirmed figure of 147 fatalities across the 4 nations. Valdoria, 43. Norheim, 61. This number has risen significantly and appears connected to the power outage and its secondary effects, including the hypothermia situations we mentioned earlier, and at least one house fire in the Daras district caused by an unattended candle. Kalthera, 28. Sarath, 15. And this Sarathian figure may reflect early incidents along the coastal road network as people attempted to move in the dark before the military presence was fully established. Combined with 1,109 injured so far, a figure we've assembled from available hospital reports, the human cost of this first night is becoming starkly visible.
A house fire in the Daras district caused by an unattended candle, the kind of thing that can happen on any night. A candle left too close to a curtain, a moment of exhausted sleep, but which, on a night like this, with emergency services stretched beyond capacity and roads blocked by military checkpoints, becomes a tragedy that compounds. We have a report from a listener in Daras who watched it happen. He says the fire spread to 2 adjacent buildings before a military unit, not the fire department, arrived with extinguishers. He says 3 families lost their homes. They are standing in the street, he writes, with nothing. One of the mothers is holding a child's shoe, just one shoe. I don't know why that detail, one shoe, gets me more than anything else tonight, but it does. That one shoe is everything about what is lost when the ordinary machinery of safety breaks down.
At 6:15 a.m., 10.5 hours in, there is movement on the Sarath maritime situation. The Unified Central Corridor Command, which is the joint military body coordinating the 4-nation martial law operation, has issued a brief statement specifically regarding the naval vessels. The statement reads, "Naval forces of the Central Corridor are engaged in the assessment and management of unidentified maritime activity off the western coast of Sarath. This activity is believed to be connected to the Ironfall network and is being treated as a component of the ongoing containment operation. Civilian residents of Sarath's coastal districts, specifically the settlements of Harrow Bay, Vestline, and Portura, are instructed to evacuate inland to designated shelters immediately. This is a precautionary directive. 3 coastal settlements, Harrow Bay, Vestline, and Portura, populations roughly 12,000, 9,000, and 22,000 respectively. Approximately 43,000 people are being told to leave their coastal homes in the dark of pre-dawn on roads that are under military control, with no explanation beyond the word precautionary."
43,000 people. Before sunrise, I want to tell you about what an evacuation looks like at this scale, in the dark, on a night that has already been running for 10 hours. Our listener in Sarath, the Coast Guard officer, has been sending us messages throughout the night, and his most recent, sent at 6:05 a.m., says the roads are jammed, people are moving but slowly. There are no streetlights in most of the coastal road sections. The power situation here mirrors Norheim, partial and unstable. I can see headlights in a long, slow line heading east. People are calm, but the calm has the quality of shock, I think. Like they've run out of the energy to be afraid. They're just moving because they've been told to move. The calm of shock. I think that is where a lot of people are right now. That is not a bad place to be. That is the body's way of getting through the night.
Sunrise is arriving. It is 6:52 a.m. in Valdres, 11 and a half hours since the declaration, and the first light is coming over the Velne River Delta. Our monitoring sources in Valdoria describe the capital city as eerily still. Military patrols are operating in all districts. Road checkpoints remain active. But the pre-dawn panic, the crowds, the desperate movement, has, for the most part, exhausted itself. People are indoors. The city is quiet in a way that is not peace. In Norheim, the darkness continues for most of Olvenhaven. Power restoration has not yet begun, though grid repair teams under military escort are reportedly now at the Kessler substation. The Grenthal Arena shelter now houses over 18,000 people, and military supply trucks arrived at 6:30 a.m. with food packages, water, and emergency heating blankets. The supply delivery is described by our contacts there as adequate for the immediate moment, but with limited reserves for a second day.
As the sun rises, I want to give you something that is not a number and not a bulletin. In the coastal district of Vestline-Serath, one of the 3 towns ordered to evacuate, a midwife named Sorrel Aiken did not leave. She stayed because she had a patient in labor, a woman who could not be moved safely in the dark on a chaotic road in her 9th month. At 5:47 a.m., Sorrel delivered a healthy baby girl in a house 3 kilometers from the coast, with the sound of military vehicles in the distance and the sea on the other side of the hills. The baby's mother, according to a message from Sorrel herself, sent to us just 20 minutes ago, wants to name her Alba, which in the old regional dialect means first light. A child named First Light, born on the worst night any of these 4 nations has known in living memory. That baby is alive. Her name is Alba. And we know about her.
It is 8:30 a.m. 13 hours in. The 3rd government communiqué has been released, and this one carries substantially more detail than its predecessors. I'll summarize the key points. First, Ironfall has been identified as a non-state hostile intelligence network, believed to be operating from external staging points outside the central corridor, with cells embedded across all 4 nations over an 8-month period. The network's objective, according to the statement, was to simultaneously disable the military command authentication systems of all 4 nations at a pre-specified trigger moment, effectively rendering coordinated military response impossible and leaving the central corridor open to what the statement describes as external territorial action. Second, the naval vessels off Serath have been positively identified. They are flagged to a non-state maritime entity operating under the cover of a private security company, and they are carrying, I am reading this carefully, offensive material and personnel consistent with a rapid territorial seizure operation. Third, Central Corridor naval forces, supported by 2 allied nation vessels that arrived overnight, have established an intercept perimeter, and the unidentified fleet has, as of 7:45 a.m., halted its advance. There has been no engagement.
No engagement. Those are the 2 most important words in that entire statement. The ships have stopped. The perimeter is holding. I want to make sure everyone listening understands what that means. We are not, as of this moment, at war. The worst scenario, the one that was perhaps always the real target of Ironfall, has not occurred, but it came close. It came very close in the dark, with the power out in Olvenhavn and 43,000 people evacuating a coastal territory in the pre-dawn and a midwife delivering a baby 3 kilometers from the sea. It came close enough that we should never stop thinking about how close it came. And I think there will be many people in positions of authority who will spend many years being very glad they moved when they did, and also very quietly asking themselves what they could have known sooner.
The evacuation of Harrow Bay, Vestline, and Portura is largely complete as of 9 a.m., 14 hours in. Military counts put approximately 38,000 of the estimated 43,000 residents at inland shelters. Search teams are being deployed for the remaining 5,000, many of whom are believed to have self-evacuated to the homes of family and friends in inland towns, and are simply not registered at official shelters. The Sarathian inland town of Keld has effectively tripled its population overnight, with refugees from the coastal districts sleeping in schools, community halls, and private homes. One listener from Keld describes it as chaotic but surprisingly functional. People are sharing food, sharing floors. Nobody is turning anyone away. I want to contrast that with the figure that is sitting in front of me from our data team. Casualty count is now 147. That is the world at 9 a.m. Warmth inside a school in Keld, and 147 people who are not there to feel it.
Nobody is turning anyone away. I keep coming back to the ordinary goodness of people in extremity, Mrs. Phelan's tea, the volunteers at Grenthal Arena, Brie Aldana walking door to door with her paramedic bag and a lantern and no announcement authorizing her to do so, the residents of Keld opening their doors to strangers from the coast, the retired teacher reading stories to children in the corner of a sports arena. I know that other things happened tonight too, the checkpoint confrontations, the crowd crush, the fire in Darras with the mother and the single shoe. I am not looking away from those. But I think it matters. It matters intensely. To insist on the full picture. The full picture includes the lantern and the open door and the shared floor.
It is 10:45 a.m. 15 hours in. Power restoration in Olvenhaven has begun. Grid technicians at the Kessler substation, working under military escort, have restored power to approximately 210,000 households in the southern and central districts of the city. The northern districts, the ones that have been dark the longest, since 11:15 p.m. last night, are expected to regain power by early afternoon. Hospitals that had been running on generators are reporting relief. The temperature in Olvenhaven has risen to 8 degrees Celsius with the morning sun, which has significantly reduced the acute hypothermia risk. Our cumulative casualty count has now moved to 201 confirmed fatalities across the 4 nations, with Norheim accounting for 94 of those, the highest single nation toll, reflecting the combined impact of the power outage. The cold, the logistical chaos of a major city plunged into darkness on the first night of an emergency it received no warning for.
201. We have crossed 200. I want to keep saying the number out loud every time it moves because these are people. In Norheim alone, 94 people are dead. Some of them died of cold, alone in dark apartments. Some died in the chaos of crowds at the rail station. Some because an emergency service couldn't get to them in time. At 15 hours into a crisis that was always going to produce human cost, we are at 201. Whatever happens in the next 9 hours, we owe it to those 201 people to ask, when this is over, every hard question about how this could have been handled differently and what could have been done to reduce that toll. The inquiry that is presumably coming has a great deal to answer for.
It is now 12:30 in the afternoon, 15 and a half hours in, though we are measuring from 8:47 p.m. last night, so the calendar now tells us it is the following day. The 4th official statement has arrived, and it marks a notable shift in tone. This is the first statement from the 4 governments that contains anything resembling an explanation of outcomes. Quote, "The Ironfall containment operation has succeeded in its primary objectives. As of 11 a.m., all 214 detained operatives have been processed. Network infrastructure damage has been assessed and is being repaired. The naval incident off Sarath has been stabilized. No foreign power has claimed or is expected to claim responsibility for the Ironfall network. The Central Corridor Unified Command is reviewing the timeline for curfew relaxation and will issue specific guidance at 3 p.m. Citizens are thanked for their cooperation and resilience. End quote. Citizens are thanked for their cooperation and resilience. That is the first expression of anything resembling gratitude in the official communications, and I note it, both for what it says and for what it doesn't say about the people who didn't survive the night.
Citizens are thanked for their cooperation and resilience. I'm going to sit with the way that phrase can feel hollow for just a moment, and then I'm going to tell you why I think it matters that they said it at all. Because even in political language, there is sometimes a reaching toward the people, an acknowledgement that real human beings lived through this night and paid a real cost. I don't think a statement of thanks is sufficient, but I think refusing to note it would be its own kind of dishonesty. So, noted, insufficient. And I'll take both of those things to be true at the same time, because the whole night has been full of things that are true at the same time.
At 2:17 p.m., 17 and a half hours in, we have an important technical update from the financial sector, because the economic dimension of this crisis has been quietly unfolding alongside everything else. The clearing networks for the Central Corridor's banking system have been offline since approximately 7 p.m. last night, predating the martial law declaration by nearly 2 hours, which further supports the Ironfall cyber attack timeline we reported earlier. That means for 17 and a half hours, the four-nation banking system has been unable to process transactions. ATMs across Valdoria and Norheim are confirmed to be offline or empty. Credit and debit payments have been non-functional. The practical effect: for 17 hours, these societies have been running on physical cash and barter. Pharmacies in Valdres have been dispensing medication to people who have documentation of their prescriptions and need, at no charge, on trust. Grocery stores in Calthera, according to listener reports, have been allowing families to take essential food items with written IOUs, tracked by store employees. The Central Corridor's Financial Supervisory Authority estimates that the clearing network can be restored within 6 to 8 hours of the declaration of system safety.
IOUs, in a grocery store, tracked by a store employee with a handwritten ledger. There is something both tender and ancient about that, a return under pressure to the fundamental economy of human trust. You take what you need, you write down what you took, and you'll square it when things return to normal. 17 hours ago, a cashier and a frightened parent standing in a grocery store made a silent agreement that society holds together by common consent, by the agreement that we will make it right. There is no law that required that cashier to keep that ledger. There is no enforcement mechanism for those IOUs, just a person deciding that the right thing to do was to trust the person standing in front of them. That decision, repeated quietly across hundreds of stores in 4 nations, is civilization operating at its most elemental level.
At 3:08 p.m., 18 and a half hours in, the 5th communiqué has arrived, and it contains the most consequential announcement of the day. The Central Corridor Unified Command has declared a partial relaxation of curfew restrictions effective at 5 p.m. today. Specifically, the nighttime curfew will remain in place from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Military checkpoints will remain operational on primary arterials, but will shift to identification and verification protocols rather than movement prohibition. Serath's coastal evacuation orders for Harrow Bay and Vestline, the 2 smaller communities, have been lifted, and residents may begin returning home. Portura's evacuation order remains in place pending assessment of coastal infrastructure. Airports will remain closed until further notice. Ports will remain closed but are being assessed for limited reopening of essential supply chain traffic within 24 hours. Schools, businesses, and non-essential services will remain closed. This is a partial opening. The world has not returned to normal, but the long night is very slowly beginning to show a crack of something that might, in time, become ordinary life again.
A crack of light. I'll take it. We got a message in the last hour from Emin. Remember him? The man driving home from his hospital shift who found the checkpoint blocking the Fenwick district, who watched the woman in the next car cry and didn't know what to say. He wrote again just now. He says, I slept for 4 hours. I just made coffee. There are birds outside. I can hear them. I don't know why that made me cry. Eamon, I know why it made you cry. Because birds don't know about Ironfall. Birds don't know about martial law or naval fleets in the dark or 201 people who didn't make it through the night. They just do the thing they do at dawn, which is sing. And after a night like this one, that sound, that ordinary sound, is almost unbearable in the best possible way. Hold on to your coffee. Hold on to those birds.
It is 5:45 p.m., 21 hours in. The sun is beginning to lower over the central corridor. The curfew relaxation that took effect at 5 p.m. has produced the first visible easing of tension in the streets of Valdres, where our sources report small numbers of people beginning to emerge, slowly, carefully, from their homes. Not a flood, a trickle. People walking to check on neighbors, people carrying food between households, a group of young men apparently acting on their own initiative who have set up a street table in the Fenwick district distributing soup from a pot brought from someone's apartment. The Grenthal Arena shelter in Olvenhaven has seen its population drop from its peak of over 18,000 to approximately 11,000 as people with confirmed home addresses and restored power begin to make their way back. Power is now restored to approximately 74% of the Olvenhaven grid. The banking clearing network as of 4:30 p.m. has been partially restored. Basic ATM functionality is returning in Valdoria, and point-of-sale systems are coming back online in Calthera.
We have one more message I want to read before we head into the final hours of this broadcast. This one is from someone who identifies themselves only as a school principal in Moreni, Calthera. They write, I have been thinking all day about tomorrow because tomorrow at some point children will come back to school and they will have 1,000 questions I don't have answers to, and some of them will have experienced something frightening last night. A parent who was afraid, a checkpoint on the way home, a night in the dark without explanation, and some of them will carry it for a long time, whether they know it or not. I am thinking about what I will say to them. I think I will say, you were here. You made it through the night, and the people who love you did everything they could to keep you safe. And that is not nothing. That is everything. A principal in Mirene preparing the words for tomorrow's assembly. That is the work of the next 10 years right there in one small paragraph.
It is 7:30 p.m. We are marking 22 hours and 43 minutes since the declaration. The 6th official communiqué has been released, and I want to read its most significant passages in full. Quote, the Ironfall network has been fully neutralized within the central corridor. No active operatives remain at large. Military authentication systems have been restored and independently verified by all 4 national defense ministries. The threat to Serath's coastal territory has been resolved. The unidentified naval fleet reversed course at 11:30 a.m. and has been tracked moving south-southwest toward international waters. It has not re-engaged and is now beyond practical operational range. Coalition partners are monitoring its movement. Casualties sustained across all 4 nations in connection with the declaration and the events of the past 23 hours stand, as of 7 p.m., at an officially confirmed 247 fatalities, with 1,109 individuals having sustained injuries requiring medical attention. The Central Corridor Unified Command extends its deepest condolences to the families of those lost. A formal inquiry into the Ironfall operation, its origins, and the decisions made during its execution will be convened within 30 days. End quote.
247 people, the formal number, officially confirmed, and 1,109 injured, and the promise of an inquiry. I believe the inquiry is necessary. I believe the 247 families deserve not just condolences, but answers, like real answers on the record under oath. They deserve to know why the threat wasn't neutralized before it required a martial declaration that trapped millions of people in their homes in the dark. They deserve to know whether those 247 deaths were unavoidable or whether some of them, the ones who froze in unheated apartments, the ones who died in crowd situations that perhaps didn't have to reach that scale, were the consequence of decisions that could have been made differently. An inquiry in 30 days is the minimum, and this broadcast, this station, will be there when it convenes.
It is now 9 p.m., 24 hours, almost to the minute, since the joint declaration of martial law across the 4 nations of the Central Corridor. The nighttime curfew, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., has now come into effect again, as announced, and citizens are returning indoors for the second night. But this second night is different from the first in every measurable way. The power in Olvenhaven is 89% restored. The banking system in Valdoria and Calthera is functional. Airports remain closed, but the Valdorian Civil Aviation Authority has announced that a partial resumption of domestic flights will occur tomorrow morning. Ports remain sealed, but Port Valdres has confirmed that 2 essential supply vessels, one carrying pharmaceutical cargo, one carrying refined fuel, have been granted military clearance to enter harbor at first light tomorrow. The Norheim fuel reserve situation, which we flagged early this morning, will stabilize once Port Olvenhaven follows suit within 36 hours. The immediate crises, the cold and the dark, the fuel and the medicine, are being managed. The unidentified naval fleet is moving away from Serath's coast, trailing no flag and no explanation into the dark of the Southern Sea.
One last message. This one came in at 8:49 p.m., 1 minute before the curfew began for the second night. It is from Dasha, the woman from Olvenhaven, who told us early this morning that she found a candle, that her daughter was asleep, and that she was going to keep listening to our voices until morning. She writes, "The lights came back on at 2 this afternoon. I cried. My daughter helped me make dinner, proper dinner, on the stove. She's been home from school today and she asked me what martial law meant. I told her it meant the people in charge of keeping us safe got very scared for a little while and made some very big decisions to try to protect us. She asked if the decisions worked. I said I thought so mostly. She asked if they were good decisions. I said I didn't know yet. She said that was an honest answer. That little girl, she deserved an honest answer. And she got one. That too is everything."
So here is where we stand. 24 hours after the declaration, across the 4 nations of the Central Corridor, Valdoria, Norheim, Calthera, and Serath, the situation is as follows. The Ironfall network has been dismantled. 214 operatives are in custody across 4 countries. Military authentication systems are restored and independently verified. The unidentified naval fleet has retreated and is under Allied monitoring. The nighttime curfew is in effect, but the broader lockdown has been substantially relaxed. Power is being restored. Essential supply chains are beginning to move. Banks are returning to function. 247 people are confirmed dead. 1,109 are confirmed injured. Nearly 43,000 people were evacuated from Serath's coast in the dark before sunrise. 18,000 people spent the night in an emergency arena shelter in a northern city with no heat and no power. And this station stayed on the air for all of it.
The 72 to 96-hour lockdown window remained in effect for its full duration, ending 94 hours after the initial declaration. Power was fully restored to Norheim within 31 hours of the initial outage. Port Valdres and Port Olvenhaven reopened to essential commercial traffic within 48 hours, easing the pharmaceutical and fuel supply crises before they reached critical levels. The banking clearing network was fully restored across all 4 nations within 36 hours, and the IOU system adopted by grocery stores in Calthera, I can confirm this because the reports came in over the following days, was honored. Every single ledger in every store that kept one, not a single debt was disputed or denied. The formal inquiry into Ironfall, convened 28 days after the declaration, ran for 14 months and produced a 2,300-page report. Its findings identified a foreign state intelligence apparatus operating through proxies and cutouts to maintain deniability, with the objective of destabilizing the Central Corridor long enough for the naval seizure of Sarath's northern strait to succeed. The report named the operation a near miss of historic proportions.
The final confirmed death toll from the 24-hour martial law period and its direct aftermath was 312. The official 247 was revised upward over the following 2 weeks as delayed medical reports and mortality data from disconnected Norheim districts were processed. 312 people. Of those, 94 were in Norheim, most attributable to the power outage and its cascade effects. Hypothermia, medically compromised individuals without refrigerated medications, and the house fire in Daras. The remaining 218 were spread across Valdoria, Calthera, and Sarath. Of the total, 71 deaths were directly attributed to military checkpoint and crowd control incidents. Those 71 specifically were the subject of a separate sub-inquiry that resulted in the disciplinary review of 23 military officers and the formal court-martial of 4, 2 of whom were ultimately convicted of unlawful use of force. The 1,109 officially injured included all those who sought hospital care, but the independent medical review conducted 6 months later estimated a further 3,200 individuals experienced injuries they did not report during the crisis.
The Central Corridor recovered. That is the plain answer to the question of what happened next. It was damaged, not in its geography or its infrastructure in any permanent sense, but in its people. 312 people were dead. The trauma settled into the populations of all 4 nations in ways that showed up in mental health data, in therapy wait lists that grew by 340% in the year following the declaration, in the way people responded differently to emergency alerts for years after. Parents told their children the story of the night, and the children told their children, and it became part of the particular grief knowledge that societies carry, the memory of how close things came to being different. The naval fleet that approached Sarath's coast was identified through subsequent intelligence work. The country responsible never acknowledged its connection. The 4 nations' defense relationship deepened, and within 3 years, the Central Corridor had signed a comprehensive mutual defense treaty with 3 allied nations, significantly expanding the coalition that had helped contain the Sarath naval threat on that first night.
Humanity stabilized. That is the definitive answer to the question of what followed. Not without cost, not without lasting consequence, not without the long work of repair and grief and accountability that the inquiry and the court-martials and the therapy waiting rooms all represent. Stabilized does not mean unscathed. It means the machinery continued. The ports reopened and the goods moved and the fuel flowed and the planes lifted again from Valdres Central and Olvenhaven International. The rail station, that station at the center of Olvenhaven, where the crowd panicked on the first night, reopened 4 days after the declaration, and a small memorial was placed at the platform where people were injured. A cluster of candles in a brass holder that someone unnamed left there, and that the station's staff quietly decided to maintain. The world after the first night of martial law in the Central Corridor was smaller than it had been. Smaller in the way that any world is smaller after the people who were in it are gone from it. But it was continuous. It went on.
It is 9:47 p.m., exactly 25 hours after the declaration. I am Maya Ross. This is Blackout Radio. We came on air tonight because a woman named Nara in Olvenhaven said she could hear helicopters and she didn't have answers for her children. And she asked us to please just keep talking. We talked. For 25 hours we talked, because that is what this station is for, and because you were listening, and because the fact of your listening on the other end of this signal, in the dark, on battery power, in a sports arena smelling of cold concrete, in a farmyard with a pot of tea, in a coastal town with the sea over the hills, mattered to us every moment of this night. Somewhere tonight, in a city that has its lights back on, a woman named Dasha is putting her daughter to bed, and a man named Grell has stopped walking circles around his kitchen table. A midwife named Sorel is resting, and a baby named Alba is sleeping her first full night in the world, a world that, for all its difficulty, held together enough to receive her. A principal in Myrene is writing notes for tomorrow's assembly, a fisherman is back in the harbor, and Mrs. Phelan from next door in Breck, Calthera, who made tea when nobody knew what else to do, Mrs. Phelan has probably gone inside and gone to sleep, as should you, as should all of us. We made it through the night.
I'm Daniel Voss. This has been a live emergency broadcast from Blackout Radio. Stay safe. Stay together. We will be on the air tomorrow. Good night.
Good night.